This is the story of Real Madrid, a story that stretches back more than a century, through victories and defeats, through triumphs and crises, through moments that shaped not only a football club, but also the identity of an entire nation. When we look at Real Madrid today, we see the white shirt recognized everywhere in the world, the club that has won more European Cups than anyone else, the symbol of prestige and global excellence. But the story begins far away from that. It begins in a Madrid of the early 20th century, a city still finding its way into the modern world, a city where a new game was beginning to take root. At the turn of the century, Spain was a country in transition. The empire that had once stretched across oceans had collapsed, the last colonies lost in 1898. The mood of the country was uncertain, a mix of nostalgia and desire for renewal. In Madrid, intellectuals, students, and dreamers looked for new forms of identity, for new ways of belonging. Among the many cultural influences that arrived from abroad, one seemed particularly curious: football. Brought by English merchants, travelers, and students returning from abroad, the game slowly appeared in the fields and open spaces of Spanish cities. At first it was seen as a novelty, a pastime of foreigners. But little by little, young Spaniards fell in love with it. In Madrid, a small group of enthusiasts began to meet to play. They wore no uniforms, had no stadium, and the rules were often improvised. Yet there was something magical about chasing the ball across dusty ground, something that brought people together. In March of 1902, this passion took a new form. Led by Juan Padros and his brother Carlos, the players decided to formalize their gatherings. They created a club and they called it Madrid Football Club. The creation of the club coincided with a moment of celebration in Spain. That same year, the nation prepared for the coronation of King Alfonso XIII. As part of the festivities, the first national football competition was organized, the Copa del Rey. Madrid Football Club entered, and though they did not win, the experience marked their arrival on the national stage. The young team wore simple white shirts, white shorts, and dark socks. The look was plain, but it carried a certain elegance. Over time, this all-white uniform would become one of the most iconic in the history of sport. Madrid FC began to grow in strength and reputation. In 1905, just 3 years after their founding, they claimed their first Copa del Rey trophy. And then another and another and another. 4 consecutive titles between 1905 and 1908 gave the young club credibility. They were not just another team. They were winners, and they were building a culture that valued ambition and success. These victories resonated with the people of the capital. Madrid now had a football team that could represent it, a team that gave citizens something to celebrate, something to feel proud of in difficult times. The matches of those years were modest affairs by modern standards. There were no grand arenas, no international audiences. Instead, the games took place in small grounds with a few hundred or perhaps a few thousand spectators. Fans stood on the sidelines or sat on wooden benches. They shouted encouragement, argued about refereeing decisions, and celebrated goals with the same passion we still see today. The scale was smaller, but the emotions were real. Football was beginning to weave itself into the social fabric of Madrid. Over the years, the club became more organized. Leadership changed hands and players came and went. Yet the desire to grow remained constant. Madrid FC was not content to be an average club. It wanted to stand at the forefront of Spanish football. In 1920, a significant recognition came. King Alfonso XIII granted the club royal patronage. From then on, the team would be known as Real Madrid Club de Football. The crest was altered to include a royal crown, a visible symbol of prestige. With one gesture, Madrid was transformed from a promising football club into a national institution. The royal title did more than decorate the badge. It placed Real Madrid on a different level in the public imagination. The club was now linked to the monarchy, to tradition, to authority. For its supporters, it was a matter of pride. For its rivals, it was sometimes a source of resentment. But either way, it gave Real Madrid a distinctive identity that would stay with it forever. Life for the players was still far removed from the glamour of modern football. They trained when they could, often balancing studies or jobs with their love of the game. They traveled by train or even on foot to matches, carrying their equipment in simple bags. There were no million-euro contracts, no armies of photographers waiting outside. Yet, in a way, this purity gave the club something important. A foundation built on passion rather than money. The early players were amateurs in the truest sense, men who played because they loved the sport. As the club established itself, rivalries began to take shape. Across town, Atlético Madrid had been founded in 1903, originally by Basque students. Soon, the matches between Madrid FC and Atlético became heated affairs. The first derbies were about more than football. They were contests of identity, of belonging, of pride. Winning against the neighbor meant everything. These games planted the seeds of a rivalry that still burns more than a century later. Step by step, year by year, Real Madrid grew. By the end of the second decade of the 20th century, the club had already built a name for itself. It was no longer an experiment or a pastime. It was a recognized force in Spanish football, carrying the title of Real, playing in the famous white kit, and attracting a growing community of fans. Though the European glory and the global fame were still decades away, the essence of Real Madrid had been born. It was the essence of ambition, of striving to be the best, of never settling for less. And so the story was set. From the dusty fields of early Madrid, from the passion of a few young men, from the pride of a city searching for identity, Real Madrid emerged. A club destined to become far more than a football team. A club that would grow into a legend. The 1920s arrived, and with them came a new era not just for Real Madrid but for Spanish football as a whole. The game was evolving. More clubs were being formed across the country. More fans were filling the stands, and the sport was slowly transforming from a pastime into a central part of Spanish culture. Real Madrid, carrying its royal title and its proud white shirt, entered this decade with ambition, but also with challenges. Madrid itself was a city in motion. The population was growing, the streets were becoming busier, and cafes and taverns were filled with talk of politics, literature, and increasingly of football. A match was no longer just a match. It was an event, something people planned their weekends around, something that gave them stories to tell during the week. The bond between the people of Madrid and their club was deepening, and the white shirt was slowly becoming a symbol of identity for the capital. On the pitch, Real Madrid faced stronger opposition than ever before. Clubs like Athletic Bilbao, Barcelona, and Atlético Madrid had become serious rivals. Every match was hard-fought, every title contested fiercely. Yet Madrid continued to show resilience, building teams that could challenge the best. By now, players were becoming better-known figures in society. Their names appeared in newspapers, their goals were celebrated in the streets, and children began to dream of wearing the white shirt one day. In 1929, a major milestone changed everything. Spain introduced its first national league, La Liga. Until then, the Copa del Rey had been the primary competition, but now there would be a league where clubs from across the country would face each other in a season-long battle. Real Madrid was among the founding members, and the arrival of La Liga gave the club a new stage on which to prove its quality. The early years of the league were intense. Matches were physical, often brutal by modern standards. The pitches were heavy, the refereeing inconsistent, and the players had little protection. Yet the crowds loved it. Thousands gathered to see their heroes play, to feel the tension and excitement of league football. Real Madrid's participation gave the competition prestige. They were not the first champions, but their presence was felt immediately. The white shirts stood out, and the team quickly became one of the main attractions of the league. In these years, a young man named Santiago Bernabeu was making his mark. At first, he was a player. A forward known for his strength and determination, he represented the fighting spirit of Madrid. Bernabeu was not the most gifted technically, but he was loyal and passionate. His connection with the club went beyond the pitch. He loved Real Madrid, and Real Madrid would one day be shaped in his image. The 1930s brought turbulence, both on and off the field. Spain was a nation divided, moving toward conflict and instability. Politics began to influence football, and football in turn became a mirror of society. Real Madrid found itself in the middle of these currents, a club of growing power in a country that was struggling with its own identity. Still, on the pitch, the team pushed forward. In 1931, they won their first ever La Liga title. It was a landmark achievement, proof that Madrid could not only succeed in cup competitions but also dominate across a full season. The victory was celebrated widely, giving the city something to hold on to in uncertain times. 2 years later, in 1933, Madrid claimed their second league title. They had established themselves as a force in Spanish football, a club that could no longer be ignored. The players who wore the white shirt were becoming national figures, admired not only in the capital but across the country. The team had built a reputation for resilience and determination, traits that would define Real Madrid for decades to come. But as the decade went on, the clouds of politics darkened further. The Spanish Civil War broke out in 1936, and like the nation itself, football was torn apart. Stadiums became silent, competitions were suspended, and many players saw their careers interrupted, some never to return. Real Madrid, like all clubs, suffered deeply. The war left scars across the country, and the club would take years to recover from the disruption. Yet even in these troubled times, the idea of Real Madrid endured. The supporters kept their connection alive, remembering the great matches, the titles, and the feeling of pride the club had given them. The white shirt, though absent from the pitch, remained present in people's hearts. When peace would eventually return, the club would rise again, stronger than before. For now, the 1920s and 1930s represented the coming of age of Real Madrid. From a group of enthusiasts at the dawn of the century, the team had become champions of Spain, had gained royal patronage, and had planted the seeds of greatness. The club had weathered challenges, celebrated triumphs, and endured tragedy. And above all, it had built an identity of ambition, of perseverance, of pride. The foundations had been laid, and though the Civil War brought silence to the pitches, the story of Real Madrid was only just beginning. Soon, a man who once played as a forward for the club would return as a leader, and under his vision, Real Madrid would not only recover, but transform into the most powerful football institution in the world. The war had ended, but Spain was left wounded and divided. Football, like so much of life, had to be rebuilt from the ground up. Clubs had lost players, stadiums had been damaged, and the rhythms of competition had been broken. For Real Madrid, the late 1930s had been years of silence and survival. When the 1940s began, the club faced the challenge of rediscovering its identity in a country trying to move forward from devastation. It was in these years that Santiago Bernabéu re-emerged, no longer as a player, but as a visionary. Bernabéu had spent decades tied to Madrid, first as a footballer, then as a coach, and later in administrative roles. He had lived through the triumphs of the 1930s and the hardships of the war, and now, with the club at a crossroads, he stepped forward to lead. In 1943, he became president of Real Madrid, a role he would hold for more than 3 decades. His presidency would change not only the fate of the club, but also the shape of football itself. Bernabéu believed that Madrid could not just recover. It had to grow, to innovate, to aim higher than any other club dared to. He saw football not only as a sport but as a symbol, a source of pride for a city and a nation that had been through so much. He understood that to achieve greatness, Real Madrid needed more than good players. It needed infrastructure, organization, and vision, and so he began to build. One of his first and most ambitious projects was a stadium. At the time, Madrid played in the Chamartin, a modest ground with limited capacity. Bernabéu dreamed bigger. He imagined a stadium that would be the largest in Europe, a stadium that could welcome tens of thousands of fans and symbolize Madrid's ambition. Many thought he was mad. Spain was poor, recovering from war. Resources were scarce. But Bernabéu pushed forward. He secured loans, convinced backers, and in 1947, the new Chamartin Stadium opened its doors. With a capacity of over 70,000, it was a marvel of its time. Standing in the stands, a fan could feel the immensity of the place, the sense that something extraordinary was beginning. The stadium would later be renamed in Bernabéu's honor, becoming one of the most famous arenas in world sport. But already in the late 1940s, it was a beacon of ambition, proof that Real Madrid was not just surviving, but striving to lead. At the same time, Bernabéu set about restructuring the club. He modernized its organization, brought in new staff, and established youth systems to develop future players. He knew that Madrid needed talent not only from abroad but also from within Spain, from the children who dreamed of wearing the white shirt. He built a culture of professionalism, where the club would be run with discipline, ambition, and vision. As the 1980s began, a new generation was emerging. Spain itself was entering democracy, opening to the world, and Madrid too sought renewal. Out of the youth system came a group of talented players who would soon define an era. They were known as La Quinta del Buitre, the Vultures cohort, named after Emilio Butragueño, whose elegance and intelligence on the pitch earned him the nickname El Buitre. Alongside him came players like Michel, Martín Vázquez, Manolo Sanchez, and Miguel Pardiza. These young men brought energy, passion, and a new sense of identity. They were homegrown, Spanish, a reminder that Madrid could produce stars as well as sign them. In 1986, Butragueño and his companions led Real Madrid to the UEFA Cup, defeating Köln in the final. The following year, they won it again, this time against Videoton. It was not the European Cup of Di Stefano's time, but it was a European triumph nonetheless, and it rekindled belief that Madrid belonged on the continental stage. In Spain, the team dominated, with Hugo Sanchez scoring goals with acrobatic flair, with Butragueño orchestrating attacks, with the young core growing stronger each season. Real Madrid won 5 consecutive league titles from 1986 to 1990. Week after week, they crushed opponents with attacking football, filling the Bernabeu with goals and excitement. The fans celebrated their heroes, and the Quinta became legends of their own. Yet Europe remained elusive. Despite their domestic strength, Madrid often stumbled in the European Cup, falling short against clubs like Milan, Bayern, and PSV. For supporters who remembered the glory of the 1950s and 1960s, it was frustrating. But for a younger generation, Butragueño, Michel, and Sanchez were their idols, their memories, their connection to the club. The 1970s arrived with a different mood. The golden age of Di Stefano, Puskás, and Gento had faded into memory, but the echoes of their brilliance still lingered in the Santiago Bernabéu Stadium. The fans remembered the nights of European glory, the endless trophies, the aura of invincibility. Yet football was changing, and Real Madrid faced the challenge of remaining relevant in a new era. Spain itself was also changing. The dictatorship of Francisco Franco was nearing its end, and society was shifting in ways both subtle and dramatic. Football reflected these tensions. Stadiums became spaces not just of sport but of collective expression, where people could feel united, where chants carried meaning beyond the game itself. For Real Madrid, the 1970s were years of transition, of trying to maintain greatness while adapting to new realities. On the pitch, Madrid remained powerful in Spain. They won league titles, they lifted domestic cups, and their dominance in La Liga often seemed unshakable. Players like Amancio Amaro, Piri, and Santillana carried the team, ensuring that the club stayed competitive even as the European crown proved harder to recover. In 1971, Madrid reached the final of the Cup Winners' Cup, but lost to Chelsea after a replay. It was a reminder that Europe was no longer theirs alone, that other clubs had grown stronger. Still, the Santiago Bernabéu was full of life. Crowds of 50 or 60,000 filled the stands, singing and clapping, urging their team forward. For many Madrileños, supporting Real remained a way of affirming their place in the world, of finding joy in difficult times. The club's history weighed heavily, but it also inspired. Every player who pulled on the white shirt felt the responsibility of those who had come before. From the mid-1950s to the late 1960s, Real Madrid had transformed themselves from a national champion into the most famous football club on earth. Their style, their victories, their players, their stadium, all became part of a myth that stretched far beyond Spain. For children kicking a ball in the streets of Buenos Aires, for fans listening on radios in London, for dreamers in Africa or Asia, the word Madrid meant greatness. The era of Di Stefano and Puskás had ended, but its legacy would endure forever. Real Madrid had become not just a team but an idea. The idea that in football there was one club that reached higher, that chased excellence relentlessly, that set the standard for all others. And though new challenges awaited, though new rivals would emerge, The foundation of the legend had been written in golden letters across Europe. By the early 1960s, Real Madrid had written themselves into history. 5 European Cups in a row, legends on the pitch, and a president whose vision had turned dreams into reality. No other club could match their achievements, and even rivals admitted their admiration, however reluctantly. Real Madrid had become the benchmark, the club against which all others would measure themselves. As the decade continued, the dominance slowly began to fade. Stéfano grew older, Puskás could no longer run as he once did, and new teams began to rise, most notably Benfica, with Eusebio leading the way. Madrid still won, still competed, but the invincibility of the 1950s could not last forever. Time, as always, moved forward. In 1964, Inter Milan defeated Madrid in the European Cup final, and a new era seemed to be arriving. But even as others took the stage, Madrid's place in history was secure. They had not just won trophies, they had defined an age. They had shown what was possible in the new world of European football. They had built a reputation that would outlast the careers of their players. And in 1966, they proved that their story was far from over. That year, Real Madrid claimed yet another European Cup, their 6th. But this time, it was not the team of Stéfano and Puskás. It was a new generation, known as the Yee team, named after the chorus of a Beatles song popular at the time. Young Spanish players like Amancio Amaro and Piri carried the team, showing that Madrid could renew itself, that the legend was not tied to a single group of stars. Beating Partizan Belgrade in the final, Madrid lifted the trophy once more, reminding everyone that their connection to Europe was eternal. The arrival of Puskás had been a masterstroke. He came to Madrid after fleeing Hungary during political upheaval, already a star but thought by some to be past his best. Bernabeu took the risk, and the reward was extraordinary. Puskás scored with his left foot in ways that seemed almost impossible. He combined perfectly with Stéfano, 2 great footballing minds sharing one vision on the pitch. Together, they terrified defenses, scoring goals in numbers rarely seen before. Year after year, Madrid conquered Europe, and with each triumph, their fame spread further. Newspapers in South America, Africa, and Asia reported on their victories. Fans in countries far from Spain began to know their names, to admire their style, to fall in love with the white shirt. Real Madrid was becoming more than a club. It was becoming a symbol of excellence, of aspiration, of what football could be when played at its highest level. Yet these years were not only about glory abroad. At home, Madrid were also dominant. They won multiple league titles and built a reputation as the team everyone wanted to beat. Their stadium, the Chamartin, soon to be renamed the Santiago Bernabéu Stadium, was filling with tens of thousands of fans, who came not just to watch football, but to witness greatness. For many Madrileños, supporting Real was more than entertainment. It was pride, identity, a sense of belonging in a world that was rapidly changing. The influence of Real Madrid in these years extended beyond sport. In a Spain still under the shadow of dictatorship, football offered a form of escape, a place where people could dream, cheer, and feel united. The victories of Madrid gave Spaniards something to celebrate on the international stage, a reason to feel recognized in Europe. Though politics always lingered in the background, for the ordinary fan, the joy of seeing Stéfano or Puskás score was something pure, something untouchable. In 1956, Real Madrid won the inaugural European Cup, defeating Stade de Reims in the final in Paris. It was a dramatic match, with goals, comebacks, and tension until the very end. When the final whistle blew, Madrid had lifted the trophy, and with it they had begun a dynasty. The image of Bernabeu smiling, of Stéfano leading the celebrations, of the white shirts standing victorious on foreign soil, announced to the world that a new power had arrived. But this was only the beginning. The following year, in 1957, they won again. And in 1958, once more. And then in 1959 and in 1960. 5 consecutive European Cups, a streak unmatched to this day. Each victory added to the legend. Each title strengthened the bond between Madrid and the competition. Soon, the European Cup was no longer just a tournament. It was Real Madrid's tournament, their natural stage, their kingdom. The 1960 final stands out as one of the greatest spectacles in football history. Played in Glasgow at Hampden Park, it pitted Madrid against Eintracht Frankfurt. The German side were strong, but that night, Madrid were unstoppable. Di Stéfano scored 3 goals, Ferenc Puskás added 4, and Madrid triumphed 7-3. More than 127,000 fans filled the stadium, and millions listened on radio broadcasts across Europe. For many, it was the moment when modern football truly began. The speed, the brilliance, the goals, the dominance of Madrid. It left people in awe. Even today, that final is remembered as perhaps the greatest ever played. The European Cup was born in 1955, and with it came a new stage for football. For the first time, the best clubs from across the continent would meet, no longer confined within their national leagues, but measured against one another in a tournament that promised to reveal the true champion of Europe. It was a bold idea, ambitious and uncertain, but Santiago Bernabéu believed in it from the very beginning. To him, the European Cup was not just a competition, it was the future, and Real Madrid had to be at its heart. In that first edition, Madrid entered with hope and determination. They had Alfredo Di Stéfano, already proving to be one of the most complete footballers the world had ever seen. He was not just a forward, not just a midfielder, not just a leader. He was everything at once. He could defend, attack, score, create, control the rhythm of the game. When he played, Madrid played through him, and the whole team seemed to take strength from his presence. Alongside him, Paco Gento added lightning speed on the left wing, stretching defenses and dazzling crowds with his runs. Others, like Miguel Muñoz and Héctor Real, contributed their intelligence and consistency. Together, they formed a side unlike any other in Europe. Real Madrid's first steps in the European Cup were decisive. They faced clubs from distant countries, each carrying their own style of play, their own traditions. For many fans, it was the first time seeing teams from beyond their borders. The sense of novelty was intoxicating. Crowds came in large numbers, newspapers wrote about the international battles, and slowly, Europe began to fall in love with the tournament. And at the center of it, time and again, stood Madrid. To achieve that, Bernabéu brought in players who would become legends. The most famous of them was Alfredo Di Stéfano, an Argentine forward whose arrival in Madrid was surrounded by drama. Barcelona believed they had secured his signature, but through a series of negotiations and controversies, Di Stéfano ended up in white. His impact was immediate and extraordinary. He was fast, intelligent, versatile, and determined. He could score goals, create chances, and inspire his teammates. With Di Stéfano, Madrid had found the player who could carry them into a new age. Alongside him came others. Francisco Gento, the lightning-quick winger who would one day become the only man to win 6 European Cups. Raymond Kopa, a French playmaker of elegance. And later Ferenc Puskás, the Hungarian genius whose left foot remains legendary. Together, they formed a team that would redefine football. The late 1940s had been about survival and preparation. The 1950s would be about dominance. The stage was set, the stadium was ready, the president had a vision, and the players were arriving. Real Madrid was about to step into the European spotlight and begin an era that would make them not just Spain's greatest club, but the most powerful force the sport had ever seen. On the pitch, results began to follow. The team was competitive again, though the great glory was still to come. The 1940s were years of preparation, of laying the groundwork for a transformation that would soon astonish the footballing world. Players like Sabino Baranaga and José Luis Maloni carried the team forward, representing the resilience of Madrid in difficult times. But Bernabéu's greatest decision was still ahead. He understood that a club becomes great not only through infrastructure or organization, but through the players who embody its spirit. And so, in the early 1950s, he embarked on an ambitious strategy to recruit talent of the highest level. He wanted stars, players who could elevate Real Madrid beyond Spain, who could make the club known across Europe and beyond. This vision coincided with the birth of a new competition, one that would change football forever: the European Cup. The idea came from French journalist Gabriel Hanet, who proposed a continental tournament where the champions of different nations would face each other. The first edition was planned for 1955, and Bernabéu immediately recognized its potential. Real Madrid, he believed, had to be at the center of this project. Not just participating, but leading it, winning it, making it theirs. In La Liga, too, Madrid remains strong. Benzema won the Ballon d'Or in 2022. Recognition of his transformation from supporting player to leader, from quiet contributor to superstar. Vinicius, still so young, became one of the most feared wingers in the world. Modric, even in his late 30s, played with the grace of a master. A reminder that football is not only about youth but about intelligence, patience, and vision. The 2020s have not been without challenges. Rivals continue to grow stronger, new competitions and financial realities change the landscape of football, and the Bernabeu itself is being transformed into a modern arena for the future. Yet through it all, Real Madrid remains Real Madrid. The white shirt, the crest with the crown, the chants of Hala Madrid echoing through the stadium. All of it carries the weight of history, of identity, of ambition. For more than a century, Real Madrid has been more than a club. It has been a story. From the dusty fields of early Madrid to the grand stadiums of today. From Juan Pedro's and Santiago Bernabeu to Di Stéfano, Raúl, Ronaldo, and Benzema, the story has unfolded across generations. Each era has brought its heroes, its triumphs, its struggles. Each has added to the legend. The return of Carlo Ancelotti in 2021 brought stability and calm. Ancelotti, who had delivered La Decima years earlier, knew the club, the fans, and the weight of the white shirt. He built a team that mixed veterans with fresh energy. Young players like Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo became stars, their speed and creativity lighting up matches. Federico Valverde brought energy and drive. Eduardo Camavinga added depth, and later Aurelien Tchouaméni joined to secure the midfield for the future. Then came 2022, a season that reminded the world of what Real Madrid means in the Champions League. No one expected them to triumph. Paris Saint-Germain, Chelsea, Manchester City. Each opponent seemed stronger, deeper, more favored. But time and again, Madrid found a way. Against PSG, they overturned a 2-goal deficit in the Bernabeu, with Benzema scoring a hat-trick in just 17 minutes. Against Chelsea, they suffered, but a late goal from Rodrigo forced extra time, and Benzema delivered again. Against Manchester City, the semi-final seemed lost, but in the final minutes, 2 goals from Rodrigo sent the match into extra time. And once more, Benzema completed the miracle. The final in Paris brought them face-to-face with Liverpool, a team hungry for revenge after 2018. Madrid were outshot, outpossessed, but never outwilled. Vinicius scored the only goal and Thibaut Courtois, with a performance for the ages, made save after save to deny Liverpool. When the whistle blew, Madrid had lifted their 14th European Cup. 14, an unimaginable number. For fans, it felt like destiny, like the continuation of a story that never truly ends. The departure of Cristiano Ronaldo in 2018 left Real Madrid at a crossroads. For 9 years, he had been the face of the team, the guarantee of goals, the superstar who carried the white shirt into every corner of the world. Without him, many wondered if Madrid could continue to dominate. The years that followed were filled with uncertainty, with transition, with the search for new leaders. At first, there was struggle. The goals that Ronaldo had delivered seemed impossible to replace. Gareth Bale, Karim Benzema, and others tried to step forward, but the team lacked consistency. Coaches came and went. The Bernabeu, always demanding, began to question the direction of the club. Rivals like Barcelona, with Lionel Messi still dazzling, and Atletico Madrid, with Diego Simeone's discipline, made life difficult in Spain. For a moment, it seemed as though Madrid might fade, that their great era of European dominance had come to an end. But Real Madrid has always been defined by resilience. Just as they had recovered after Di Stéfano, after Puskás, after the Galácticos, they would recover again. Slowly, new leaders emerged. Karim Benzema, once overshadowed by Ronaldo, became the focal point of the attack. With intelligence, calmness, and a sense of responsibility, he grew into one of the finest strikers of his generation. Luka Modric, already a Ballon d'Or winner in 2018, continued to dictate play from midfield with elegance and precision. Toni Kroos, Casemiro, Sergio Ramos, and Marcelo remained pillars of experience, guiding the younger players who began to enter the squad. In 2018, Ronaldo departed for Juventus, leaving behind 9 years of unforgettable memories. For Champions Leagues, and more than 450 goals. For many, it marked the end of an era. But for Real Madrid, the story never ends. New heroes would rise, new chapters would be written, because the white shirt always calls for greatness. That victory opened the floodgates. In the seasons that followed, Madrid built a dynasty. Zinedine Zidane, once the Galactico midfielder, returned as coach in 2016, and under his calm leadership, Madrid did what no team had ever done before. They won the Champions League 3 times in a row, in 2016, 2017, and 2018. In 2016, they defeated Atletico again in the final, this time on penalties, with Cristiano Ronaldo scoring the decisive kick. In 2017, they beat Juventus 4-1 in Cardiff, with Ronaldo scoring twice in another breathtaking display. And in 2018, they triumphed over Liverpool in Kiev, a final remembered for Gareth Bale's stunning overhead kick and Loris Karius's mistakes. 3 consecutive European Cups, for in 5 years 13 in total. It was an era of dominance that rivaled even the Di Stefano years. At the heart of it all was Ronaldo. Season after season, he scored goals at a rate that defied belief. He became Madrid's all-time leading scorer, surpassing Raul, and leaving records shattered in his wake. His athleticism, his precision, his hunger. Every match felt like a performance, every goal a reminder of his greatness. But he was not alone. Karim Benzema, often in the shadows, provided intelligence, movement, and crucial goals. Luka Modric and Toni Kroos orchestrated the midfield with elegance and control. Casemiro brought balance, Ramos and Marcelo gave leadership and flair, and Iker Casillas, then Keylor Navas, kept the goal safe in key moments. Together, they formed one of the greatest teams the game has ever seen. Their style was a mixture of power and artistry, of lightning counterattacks and moments of pure individual brilliance. Fans across the world watched in awe as Real Madrid lifted trophy after trophy, writing another golden chapter in their endless history. In 2010, José Mourinho arrived as coach, bringing intensity, discipline, and an iron will. He built a team that could compete with Guardiola's Barcelona, adding steel to Madrid's elegance. In 2011, Madrid won the Copa del Rey, defeating Barcelona in the final with a towering header from Ronaldo. It was his first trophy in Spain, and for the fans, a signal that the tide was beginning to turn. The breakthrough in the league came in 2012. Madrid stormed to the La Liga title with a record 100 points, scoring 121 goals along the way. Ronaldo was relentless, Benzema and Higuaín shared the load, and Mourinho's Madrid proved they could match Barcelona's brilliance with their own power and speed. The Bernabeu erupted with joy, but still, the Champions League remained elusive. Year after year, Madrid fell in the semifinals, the dream of La Decima, the 10th European Cup, just out of reach. Everything changed in 2014. Under coach Carlo Ancelotti, Madrid reached the Champions League final in Lisbon, facing Atletico Madrid. It was a tense, dramatic match. Atletico led 1-0 deep into stoppage time, their fans already tasting glory. But then, in the 93rd minute, Sergio Ramos rose highest from a corner and headed the ball into the net. The stadium exploded, the dream was alive, and in extra time, Madrid scored 3 more goals, with Ronaldo finishing the night with the 4th. At last, La Decima was theirs. The 10th European Cup, so long awaited, so desperately desired, had finally returned to Madrid. The end of the Galacticos era left Real Madrid searching for balance. They had dazzled the world with their stars, but trophies had slipped away too often, and the hunger of the Bernabeu remained unsatisfied. By the late 2000s, the club was preparing for another transformation, one that would be led by a player who would come to redefine not just Real Madrid, but modern football itself. His name was Cristiano Ronaldo. In the summer of 2009, Real Madrid signed Ronaldo from Manchester United for a world record fee. He arrived in Madrid with an aura already, a Champions League winner, a Ballon d'Or recipient, and one of the most exciting players on earth. At his presentation in the Bernabeu, more than 80,000 fans filled the stadium just to welcome him. The roar of the crowd, the sea of white shirts, the flashing cameras. It felt like the arrival of destiny. Alongside Ronaldo, President Florentino Perez once again began building a team of stars. That same summer, Kaká joined from Milan, Karim Benzema from Lyon, and Xabi Alonso from Liverpool. Later would come Ángel Di Maria, Mesut Ozil, and Luka Modric. Slowly, piece by piece, Madrid were constructing a squad capable of reclaiming their place at the top of Europe. The early years were not easy. Barcelona, under Pep Guardiola, played some of the most beautiful football the game had ever seen, with Lionel Messi at the center. The rivalry between Ronaldo and Messi became a global story, two superstars pushing each other to unimaginable heights. Every Clásico between Madrid and Barcelona felt like a final, watched by millions across the world. For Madrid fans, beating Barcelona was essential, but reclaiming Europe was the ultimate goal. But the Galacticos era was not without its problems. The focus on superstars sometimes left the squad unbalanced, with too much attention on attack and not enough on defense. Coaches came and went quickly, and despite the brilliance of individual players, consistency was often lacking. After 2003, European trophies became elusive again, and critics accused Perez of turning the team into more of a business than a sporting project. Still, the memories of Zidane's volley, of Ronaldo's unstoppable runs, of Beckham's passes, of Raúl's goals, remained unforgettable. For a generation of fans, the Galacticos defined what it meant to dream. The white shirt, worn by the greatest names of football, represented glamour and greatness. Real Madrid was not just a football club. It was an idea that reached every corner of the planet. By the middle of the 2000s, change was once again on the horizon. The Galacticos had dazzled, but the hunger for Champions League glory returned. The fans at the Bernabeu, demanding as always, looked for the next era, the next triumph, the next chapter in the eternal history of Real Madrid. The year 2000 also marked the beginning of a new project off the pitch. Florentino Perez was elected president of Real Madrid, and he came with a revolutionary idea. He wanted to combine sporting success with global marketing, to create a team that was not only strong on the pitch but also a global brand. To achieve this, he launched the policy of signing the world's most famous players, one after another, each summer. The world would come to know them as the Galacticos. The first was Luis Figo, signed from Barcelona in a move that shook the football world. Then came Zinedine Zidane from Juventus, breaking the transfer record. Later arrived Ronaldo Nazario from Inter Milan, and David Beckham from Manchester United. Alongside them stood homegrown stars like Raúl, Iker Casillas in goal, and Guti in midfield. The Galacticos era had begun. The early 2000s were a mix of spectacle and success. In 2002, Madrid won their 9th Champions League, defeating Bayer Leverkusen in the final at Hampden Park. That match is remembered for one of the most beautiful goals ever scored. Zidane, receiving a looping cross from Roberto Carlos, struck a perfect left-footed volley into the top corner. It was a moment of pure genius, a goal that seemed to capture the essence of the Galacticos: elegance, brilliance, and magic on the biggest stage. The team also won league titles, Spanish Super Cups, and international trophies. The Bernabeu was filled every week with fans eager to see the stars. Tourists from around the world came to watch Real Madrid, not only because they were a football team, but because they were an attraction, a show, a gathering of the greatest talents of their time. The mid-1990s brought new figures who would define Madrid's future. A young striker named Raúl González Blanco made his debut in 1994. Just 17 years old, he quickly became a sensation. Raúl was not the fastest, nor the strongest, but he had an instinct, a calmness in front of goal, and a relentless spirit that captured the soul of Madridismo. He scored in his second match for the club, and from then on, he never looked back. For more than a decade, Raúl would carry Real Madrid on his shoulders, becoming the captain, the icon, the face of the club. In 1998, after more than 3 decades of waiting, Real Madrid finally reclaimed the European Cup. Under coach Jupp Heynckes, Madrid faced Juventus in the final in Amsterdam. Juventus, with players like Alessandro Del Piero and Zinedine Zidane, were heavy favorites. But Madrid, led by Raúl, Mijatovic, and Hierro, found the strength to win. Predrag Mijatovic scored the only goal of the match, and when the final whistle blew, the white shirts lifted their 7th European title. For fans who had grown up hearing stories of Stéfano and Puskás but had never seen European glory themselves, it was a moment of tears, joy, and release. The legend had returned. Just 2 years later, in 2000, Madrid did it again. This time under coach Vicente del Bosque, they defeated Valencia in the Champions League final, the first ever all-Spanish final in the competition. Goals from Morientes, McManaman, and Raúl sealed a 3-0 victory in Paris. Raúl's iconic celebration, running to the corner flag with arms wide open, became a symbol of Madrid's rebirth in Europe. The club had now won 8 European Cups, and the modern era of dominance was beginning. And what makes the story remarkable is that it never ends. Even now, as new players arrive and old ones depart, as victories are celebrated and defeats endured, the history continues to grow. Real Madrid is not just about the past, not just about the trophies in the museum or the names in the record books. It is about the constant pursuit of greatness, the belief that no matter the opponent, no matter the situation, there is always a chance, always a hope, always a way. The future will bring new stars, new rivalries, new battles in Spain and in Europe. One day, Vinicius or Rodrigo or another young player will become the face of the club. One day, the Bernabeu, shining in its new form, will witness another night of miracles. And the fans, from Madrid to every corner of the world, will continue to sing, to believe, to feel the pride of supporting Real Madrid. This is the story of Real Madrid, a story that began with a group of dreamers in 1902, that passed through wars and dictatorships, through golden ages and moments of despair, through Stéfano, Puskás, Raúl, Ronaldo, and countless others. A story of ambition, resilience, and greatness. A story that is still being written. And as long as the white shirt exists, as long as the ball rolls in the Santiago Bernabeu, as long as fans raise their voices to the night sky, the story will go on.